Hey y'all know how much I love talking about moonshiners. It's an important part of our history and culture here in western North Carolina. And today I'm going to tell you about the famous Amos Owens. Famous Amos. Amos Owens was known as the cherrybounce king, and he was born to Irish immigrants in the early 1820s in Rutherfordcounty, North Carolina. And it's said that he didn't have much in the way of formal schooling, that he only attended school for a few days. At the age of 9, he was working. He was drawing water and cutting down trees. By the time he was 23, he had enough money to buy 100 acres on Cherry Mountain, which sits in the Blueridgemountains here in North Carolina. It was called Cherry Mountain because all the wild cherry trees that grew there, and he used those cherries and started stealing. Not stealing, stealing. And when he got married, he paid the justice of the peace in brandy, and he became very well known for his special kind of moonshine. It was a cherry-infused moonshine, and it was made from a mixture of corn whiskey, sourwood honey, and I've done a whole video on sourwood honey, and cherries from all them wild cherry trees that grew there. The juice of the cherries was squeezed out by his daughter's bare feet, just like on that episode of I Love Lucy. Remember that one, where they went to Italy and Lucy and Ethel was stomping on those grapes? By the time he was 29, he had made so much money that he bought the whole bloomin' mountain, and he just kept on making that liquor. But he didn't have to pay any taxes on it because this was during the tax-free era of distilled spirits. Then he went off and fought in the Civil War, and he got caught in the Union stockade and was held prisoner and nearly starved to death. But he survived, and he went home. And by that time, President Lincoln had reintroduced the Revenue Act to help pay for the war. So now there was taxes that had to be paid on liquor. But he vowed he's never going to pay taxes on his firewater, and he didn't. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But every year, the second Sunday of every June, he'd throw a big old party, and people would come from all different states, and they'd come by horseback, by mule, on foot, however they could get there, because for 25 cents, it was an all-you-could-drink cherry moonshine fest, and there was food and dancing and music and all kinds of stuff. And let me tell y'all, one thing that Appalachians know how to do, we know how to party and have a good time. And his cherry bounce went way outside Appalachia. It was on steamboats from Cincinnati to New Orleans. But them blame revenuers, they were always after him. And he had a telescope, and he'd stand on top of his mountain and look out for him. Here in the Blue Ridge, you can stand on top of a mountain and you can see South Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia. But that didn't always work for him. And one time a couple of revenuers showed up at the crack of dawn. I don't know if y'all realize this, but the term moonshining came from making illegal spirits under the light of the moon, hence the name. But these two revenuers showed up, and he offered them some of his cherry bounce. He said, "Here, try this. It's real good. Here, try some more." And they kept taking more and more until they got toe up from the flow up. They was plumb passed out. But he waited for him to come to, and he let him take him in. He got arrested a whole bunch of times and had to go to court over and over, but he was slick. He'd show up in a stovepipe hat and a Prince Albert jacket and baggy breeches. He looked like a distinguished gentleman. And he also had a sense of humor that would have the whole courtroom a-cracking up, and he already looked like a leprechaun. But this one time when he was in court in Asheville, North Carolina, he had one of his buddies show up with a wagon full of cherry bounce. He had 40 gallons of that stuff, and it was hidden under 20 bushels of taters. And whilst he was in court, his buddy was out there selling that cherry bounce, and by the time his court was over, he'd made enough money to pay the court fees and his lawyer. At his last court appearance when he was 68, he finally agreed to stop making that hooch, and the judge rewarded him with a new suit and tie, and the prosecutor gave him a new hat. It's been said that you can't reproduce his kind of cherry bounce because that particular kind of wild cherry tree doesn't grow anymore, and I don't know if that's true or not, but what I do know is that every year in Forestcity, North Carolina, they have a cherry bounce festival, and this year it's going to be held on June 6th and 7th, and y'all ought to go check it out. And get this, his great-great, I'm not sure how many greats, nephew, I think it's a nephew, is Josh Owens from the TV show Moonshiners, and another one of his descendants is Lucas Owens with South Mountain Distillery Company here in North Carolina. And Owens is a real common last name in these parts, so there's probably a whole bunch of cherry bounce descendants running around, or bouncing around. Amos Owens passed away in 1906, and he was in his 80s, and there's a whole lot more to his story, but that's the gist of it. And if any of his family members are watching, if I got anything wrong, please correct me. I didn't mean to, and I apologize. And I'd love to try some cherry bounce. I never have, but I'm going to have to get me a swaller of that stuff. I got to test it out. Anyway, the end.